Sometimes the only way out of a hole is to dig deeper until you hit something solid. Bridget Lalonde found that out on a Wednesday. Not a dramatic Wednesday, not a storm, not a confrontation, not anything cinematic. Just a Wednesday in late November when the furnace in her stepfather's house stopped working and she sat at the kitchen table in her coat, running numbers that didn't add up, because they never added up, and Raymond came home smelling like rye whiskey at 2 in the afternoon and told her she was going to solve his problem. She didn't understand what he meant at first. She did by the end of the hour. The house had been quiet for a long time before Raymond showed up in her life. Her mother, Celine, not the singer, she used to say with a tired laugh, just a woman with bad taste in men and good taste in music, had died 3 years earlier, leaving Bridget with a mortgage she couldn't carry, a grief she couldn't process, and a stepfather whose name was on half the paperwork, and whose name she'd been trying to scrub off the other half ever since. Raymond Pousset wasn't a violent man. He was something worse. He was a man who owed things to people and had a talent for making his debts everyone else's emergency. The number on the paper he slid across the table was $80,000. Bridget looked at it. She looked at him. She looked at the coffee ring on the table that she'd been meaning to sand out for 6 months. "You need to stop gambling," she said. "That's not helpful right now." "Neither am I, Raymond." He told her she was. He told her she was very helpful, actually, because he'd already spoken to someone, and the someone had agreed that the debt could be settled in a different kind of currency. Raymond used the word arrangement. He used the word temporary. He used the word practical, which was the one that finally made her understand she was not going to be able to talk her way out of this kitchen. She asked who. He said a name she'd never heard, Lecroix. He said it the way people say the name of a doctor they're afraid of, quietly, without looking up. She left the table. She went upstairs to the room that had been hers since she was 19 and was still more hers than anything else in her life. A single bed, a bookshelf of accounting textbooks, a window that faced the neighbor's vinyl fence. She sat on the edge of the mattress. She thought about calling someone. She went through the list of people she could call and realized the list was very short, and none of them had $80,000, and none of them would know what to do about a man named Lecroix. She didn't sleep. In the morning, Raymond told her a car would come at 7. She packed one bag. She didn't know why. It felt like the kind of gesture that meant something, even if she didn't know what. She packed her good blazer, her laptop, her ledgers from the part-time bookkeeping contract she ran out of the kitchen, a photograph of her mother she kept in the front pocket of every bag she'd ever owned. She brushed her teeth. She went downstairs and drank coffee standing at the counter because sitting felt like surrender. The car was a black SUV with tinted windows and a driver who didn't speak. It took her 40 minutes outside the city, into a part of Ontario she'd driven through but never stopped in. Flat land, bare trees, a sky the color of old dishwater. The house at the end of the gravel road wasn't a house. It was a compound. Stone and glass and security cameras she could see, and probably 3 times as many she couldn't. She thought, I should have run. She thought, run to where? The driver opened her door. She got out with her bag and her coffee posture and walked up the front steps like she was arriving at a job interview, because that was the only frame she had for walking into an unknown building with her stomach in her throat. Inside, a man in a charcoal suit looked her over with the kind of assessment she associated with livestock auctions in old movies. He told her to wait. She waited in a foyer with a marble floor and no chairs, which she suspected was intentional. She stood for 22 minutes. She counted, because counting was what she did when she was scared. It was the same thing that made her good at her job. Then a door opened and she was shown into a room that was part office, part library, all cold. Lecroix was standing at the window with his back to her. He was taller than she expected, brooder. He turned slowly, the way people turn when they have never had to hurry for anyone, and she got her first look at the man Raymond had traded her to, and she felt, not fear exactly, something more complicated. He was older than she'd imagined, somewhere north of 40, with grey at his temples, and a face that had been struck by something at some point, a faint dévote along his jaw. His eyes were the particular dark brown of stained walnut, and they moved over her with no more warmth than a ledger scan. "You do bookkeeping," he said. It wasn't a question. "Among other things," she said. "What other things? I also make excellent coffee and have strong opinions about amortization schedules." Something shifted in his face. Not a smile, more like a door opening a crack and immediately closing. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He sat across from her, behind a desk that held 3 laptops, a phone, a glass of water, and a single folder. He opened the folder. He turned it toward her. It was a set of financials, handwritten columns, transfers, outflow categories that didn't match inflow sources, the kind of creative accounting that screamed someone is skimming and not even doing it cleverly. "Tell me what you see," he said. She looked at it for 90 seconds. "Your logistics coordinator is stealing from you," she said. "Not a lot at once. Small amounts moved through what looks like vendor invoices, but the vendor cycle doesn't match real payment intervals. Whoever did this knows enough to look plausible, but not enough to be clean. They've been doing it for," she looked more closely, "probably 14 months. Lecroix said nothing for a long moment. "The man who brought you here," he said, "told me you were competent. I assumed he was overstating it to improve the terms. Raymond overstates everything," she said. "It's his primary skill. What's your primary skill?" She looked at him steadily. Finding what's been hidden. She didn't know where the nerve came from. Maybe it had always been there, packed under years of making herself small in Raymond's house, in rooms where no one thought she had anything worth saying. Maybe the fact that she had nothing left to lose was its own kind of freedom. Lecroix looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You'll stay in the East Wing. You'll have access to the financial records you need and no others. You will not discuss what you see with anyone except me. You will not attempt to contact anyone outside this property without my knowledge. And when the work is done, we'll discuss it then." She wanted to push. She didn't push. She had the feeling that pushing Lecroix was something you could do exactly once before it stopped being an option. The East Wing had a bedroom with a real bed, a desk, and a bathroom with actual hot water pressure, which was already better than the house on Pemberton Street. A woman named Odette brought her dinner, soup, bread, something that smelled like thyme, and left without making conversation, which Bridget respected. She ate at the desk. She opened her laptop. She started going through the folder Lecroix had given her and fell asleep at 1 in the morning with her face on her forearm and 3 pages of handwritten notes under her elbow. She thought she would hate it there. She didn't hate it. That scared her more than anything. The work took 6 weeks. Not because the ledgers were complicated. They were, but complexity was just time, and time was something she had in abundance here. It took 6 weeks because the deeper she dug, the more she found, and what she found was not just one man skimming vendor invoices. It was a system, a careful, patient, multi-layered system of misdirection that had been running so long it had started to look like legitimate accounting. Whoever had set it up had been good, better than the person maintaining it, which was why it had gotten sloppy in the last 14 months. She brought Lecroix the first report at the end of week 1. She brought him the second at the end of week 2. By week 3, she had started to understand that what she was looking at wasn't just financial fraud. It was a map, and the map pointed somewhere specific. She put it in front of him on a Thursday evening. He read it without speaking. She sat across from him and watched him read and noticed, as she had started noticing more, that he held very still when he was thinking. No fidgeting, no tapping. Just stillness, like something that had learned to conserve energy. "This is from 2 years ago," he said. 3, she said. "The setup started 3 years ago. Before that, clean. You're saying someone inside built this. I'm saying someone inside helped someone outside build it. The exterior structure is too sophisticated for an internal job alone, but without internal access, the interior piece doesn't work. It's a collaboration." "Was a collaboration," she corrected. "Past tense. The external person stopped withdrawing 8 months ago." Lecroix set down the papers. He looked at her. "Why? He don't know. That's not in the numbers. Guess." She held his gaze. "Either they got what they came for, or they got scared." He was quiet again. Then, if you had to find the external contact from what's in these records, could you? Give me another week. She found them in 5 days. She wasn't supposed to feel satisfied about that. She tried not to. The satisfaction came anyway. The particular clean snap of a problem resolved, a column that finally balanced, a mystery that turned out to have a bottom. She brought Lecroix the name on a Tuesday morning. He looked at it. His face did nothing. He said thank you in a way that made the 2 words feel like a door closing on something large. That afternoon, she heard the sound of 2 cars leaving the property quickly. She didn't ask. By evening they were back and Lecroix came to her door, the first time he'd come to her rather than the other way around, and said she'd done good work. "Is it over?" she asked. "For now." She nodded. She waited for him to say something about the arrangement, about her being able to leave, about Raymond's debt. He didn't. He looked at her for a moment with that walnut-dark gaze and said, "Eat dinner before it gets cold," and left. She stood at her desk and stared at the closed door and thought that was the strangest thank you she'd ever received, and also, somehow, the one she was most certain he meant. She had stopped counting the days somewhere around week 4. She told herself it was because she'd been busy. That was partly true. The other part was that the compound had started to have its own rhythm. Early mornings, strong coffee in the kitchen when the staff started their shifts, hours of focused work, Lecroix appearing in the doorway of whatever room she'd claimed for the afternoon, with questions that felt increasingly less like interrogation and more like conversation. He had a way of asking things that assumed she'd already thought about them. She found she usually had. Odette told her, obliquely during one of their near-silent dinner exchanges, that people didn't usually last this long. Bridget wasn't sure if she meant in the compound or in Lecroix's estimation. She didn't ask. She had started to understand that in this house, the things left unsaid were usually the most important ones. She called Raymond once, at the 6-week mark, from a phone Lecroix gave her with a list of numbers she was permitted to dial. "Are you all right?" Raymond asked, which surprised her because she hadn't expected the question. "I'm fine," she said. "Lecroix treats you okay. He treats me like a useful tool, which is more than you did." A long silence. Then Raymond said, "I know I owe you more than I can pay." "You can start by not gambling," she said. "We've been over this." She hung up and sat with the phone in her lap and waited to feel something. Anger, maybe, or the relief of finally saying the true thing. What she felt instead was tired, in the specific way of someone who has been tired for so long the tiredness has become a baseline. She went to find Lecroix. He was in the library. The real library, the one she'd been careful not to notice too much, reading something with his reading glasses on, which she had only seen once before, and had made him look, briefly, like a different person, a more approachable person. She had filed that away and tried not to take it out again. She said, "I have a question." He looked up. He waited. "When this is over, the real over, when there's nothing more to find, what happens to me?" He took off the glasses. He set them on the arm of the chair. He looked at her the way he looked at a problem he had already worked out, but was choosing how to present. "What do you want to happen?" he said. She had not been asked what she wanted in a long time. The question hit her in a spot she hadn't known, was tender. "I want to not go back to Pemberton Street," she said. "I want to work on something that matters. I want—" She stopped, recalibrated. "I want the numbers I run to be worth running," Lecroix said. "I have 17 operations across 3 provinces. None of them have clean books. Most of them have someone skimming. My last financial controller lasted 4 months before he developed a loyalty to someone other than the organization." Bridget said, "I don't have other loyalties." "I know," he said. "That's not a small thing." She understood then. Not the whole of it. Not the shape of what they were becoming to each other, which would take longer to see from the inside. But the practical architecture of it. She understood that she was being offered something. She understood that Lecroix didn't offer things to people who couldn't hold them. She sat down in the chair across from him. "Tell me about the 17 operations," she said. He did. It happened slowly, the way all real things happen, not in a moment, not in a scene, but in the accumulation of small facts. The fact that he remembered how she took her coffee without being told. The fact that he started ending his evenings in the library when she was there, ostensibly to read, actually to argue with her about expense allocation and risk management in ways that looked like arguments but felt like something else. The fact that the first time she was sick, a bad cold, mid-February, the kind that makes you feel like your skull is full of wet concrete. He sent Odette with soup every 4 hours and came himself in the evening to check on her, standing in the doorway with his jacket still on, like he hadn't meant to stay, and then stayed anyway for an hour, while she talked nonsense through her congestion, and he said very little, and didn't leave until she fell asleep. She put it in the category of things she wasn't going to think about. She thought about it constantly. The situation resolved itself not with a confession, but with a threat, because that was the language of this world, and she was learning to speak it. A rival outfit, emboldened by whatever Lecroix had cleaned out of his own house, decided to make a move. They made it in the direction of Bridget, a car that followed hers on the 2 occasions she'd been permitted to go into town, a phone call to the compound that asked for her by name. Lecroix shut down both vectors within 48 hours, with a thoroughness she did not ask for details about. What he said to her afterward was, "You're a liability if you're separate, you're an asset if you're not." She looked at him across the kitchen table. The big kitchen, not the staff one. He'd started coming to the big kitchen in the mornings. "Is that a proposal?" she said. "It's an explanation. They're not mutually exclusive." A silence. Then Lecroix, who did not smile, who had not smiled in her presence in 4 months, smiled. Small, controlled, like something he'd almost forgotten he was capable of. It restructured his face. It made him look like someone who had once been young and had decided that was a liability too. "Marry me," he said. "For practical reasons, name 3, she said. Protection, legitimacy, tax implications. She thought about Pemberton Street, the furnace, Raymond's debt, the Wednesday when she'd sat in her coat and the world had rearranged itself without her permission. "Okay," she said, "okay." It was not a romantic conversation. She had stopped needing it to be. They married in March in a room with 12 people and no flowers, because she said she didn't want flowers and he didn't argue. The ceremony was brief. The ring was not. She'd expected something understated and received instead a band of white gold that sat on her finger with the calm certainty of something that had been made for a specific purpose. She kept working. She kept finding things. She became, over the following months, the person that Lecroix's people called when something didn't add up, which meant she was called often, and which meant she started to understand the geography of the organization in ways that exceeded what any ledger could have shown her. She understood who was loyal and who was waiting. She understood where the weak points were. She started flagging them before they became problems, and Lecroix started forwarding her assessments to people she'd never met with a note that just said, "Trust this." She didn't feel powerful. That wasn't the word for it. She felt, for the first time in years, useful in a way that was proportional to her actual abilities. She felt, and this was the stranger thing, the thing that crept up on her, safe. Not in the Nav sense. She understood perfectly that the world she lived in was not a safe one, but she felt seen, which was its own kind of safety, and she had not felt seen in so long she'd stopped expecting it. Lecroix told her things in the evenings. Not everything. She understood there was still a door she was not permitted through, and she was patient about it, because patience was also one of her skills. But he told her enough. He told her about the early years, about the people he'd trusted and shouldn't have, about the cost of building something and the cost of maintaining it. He told her these things without looking for sympathy, which was why she didn't offer any. She offered instead her actual opinion, which was that he had made reasonable decisions under unreasonable conditions, and most of the outcomes were the logical consequence of that. "You're not sentimental," he said one evening. "Neither are you," she said. "I know. I'm not complaining." She looked at him across the desk, her desk now, technically, though they used it in shifts, and thought that this was what no one told you about surviving. It didn't look like what you expected. It didn't look like triumph. It looked like Tuesday evening in a library. Two people who had both been broken by different things, sitting across from each other and speaking plainly. She could live with that. She was, in fact, living with it. Raymond came to the compound in April. Lecroix had extended the invitation. She'd known he would, and had not asked him not to. Raymond arrived looking smaller than she remembered, the way people look when you see them in a context they don't control. He sat in the front room with his hat in his hands, literally, an old ball cap he'd been turning and turning. She served him coffee. She did not sit. "The debt is cleared," she said. "It has been for months." Lecroix cleared it in December. Raymond looked up. "I didn't know that," he said. "I know you didn't. I'm telling you now." "Bridge, I don't want an apology, Raymond." She kept her voice even. She had practiced keeping her voice even in the kitchen of this house until it had become a reflex. "I want you to stop gambling. I want you to go back to Kenora and see about the cousin who keeps calling you. I want you to not destroy the next 10 years the way you destroyed the last 5. Raymond was quiet. He looked at the hat in his hands. "You're different," he said. "I know. Is that good?" She thought about the question. She thought about the woman who had sat at a kitchen table in a coat, waiting for a car she didn't know how to refuse. "Yes," she said. "I think so." She saw him to the door. She watched the car take him down the gravel road until it was gone. Then she went back inside, back to the east wing that had become her wing, back to the desk with its stacks of organized chaos, and she sat down and opened the ledger for the Sudbury operation, which had a receivables problem she'd been working on for 3 days and was close to cracking. Lecroix appeared in the doorway at 6. He looked at the ledger, then at her. "Sutherland's people called again," he said. "They want a meeting." "I know. I read the message. I think you should go." "I think so too." He leaned against the doorframe. He had a habit of doing that, occupying doorways without committing to entering, as if rooms required a decision. "Come with me." She looked up. "As what?" He considered her for a moment with that walnut-dark gaze that she now knew the edges of, that she could read the same way she read a column of numbers, looking for where the truth was hiding. "As my wife," he said. "Who knows more about Sutherland's financial exposure than Sutherland does?" She closed the ledger. "I'll need a better blazer," she said. The corner of his mouth moved. "I'll have Odette arrange it." She stood. She looked at him in the doorway of the room that had started as a cell, and become, without her quite noticing, the center of something. She thought about the Wednesday in November, the furnace, the kitchen table, Raymond's voice saying the name Lecroix like a doctor's diagnosis. She had not chosen this. She knew that. She did not pretend otherwise, not to herself. But she had chosen what to do with it. She had chosen every morning since the first one when she sat down at the desk instead of watching the driveway. She had chosen to look at the numbers until they told the truth, to speak when she knew something worth saying, to stay when staying was the harder and the realer thing. That was not nothing. In this world, in any world, that was not nothing. She picked up her bag. She walked through the door.